Off and running. Perfect. All right, we're live. So thank you all very much. My name is Luke Ryan. I'm the digital sales manager for Boston 25 and Cox Media Group Digital. I'm going to be doing a quick introduction to Robert Burns, but I wanted to give you a quick overview of how to navigate this webinar from your perspective as an attendee. On the bottom of your screen, you'll see two buttons you could click on. One is Q&A, the other one is chat. Either of those will allow the panelists to see the questions you'd like to ask. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. There's roughly about 40 to 45 minutes of content, followed by the Q&A, which brings us right to 5 o'clock. So we're going to keep it right to that 1 hour, keep it nice and tight. Then I'd like to introduce Robert Burns, who is our Director of Sales, and he'll give us an overview of what we're to expect today.
Hey, thanks, Luke. Welcome, everybody, to our Adapt and Emerge webinar series focused on automotive. I'm privileged to introduce our presenters today. We have Steve Sturm, Executive Advisor, Automotive for TVB. He's going to focus on the current impact and the future outlook on automotive. I have Jen Dragon, who's our Creative Director at CMG, and she's going to talk about effective auto messaging and what you need to do right now and what you need to do in the future. And then Justin Winokur, Director of Digital Strategy at CMG, and Justin's going to focus on what you can do to take action right now, monitor signs of the recovery and what you can do then, and then how you can accelerate your long-term plan as you come out of this COVID-19. So I'm going to pass it over to Steve and let him get into it.
Excellent. And I'll just throw up the presentation here. One moment, Steve, and you should see that group. There we are. And that should go full screen there. And I'm just going to highlight Steve's video, and we are off. There you are, Steve. Thank you very much.
Great. If we can go to slide 1. So the auto industry's gone through some pretty big trauma in the last 6 to 8 weeks, but the news is good and looking better as we go forward. I want to give you first a little bit of a forecast of the market this year. 2020 total sales are forecasted to finish this year between 13 and 14.5 million vehicles. That's off of the original baseline for the year of 16.8 million. The good news is that for the last 6 weeks, we've had consecutive growth and recovery from where we were at the bottom end of this shock of COVID-19. And we've been up 5 points per week, which has recovered pretty much half of the shortfall that we've experienced so far since the outbreak began. From a major industry point of view, all states are now open for either showroom or online remote selling. 28 states, or 60% of sales, have full dealership operations. Unfortunately, Massachusetts, along with 6 other states, are still online or remote selling, and I believe now you can do service at the dealerships within Boston and the Massachusetts state. From a regional status point of view, Tampa and Dallas have been the most resilient due to their very strong pickup sales. Detroit and Philadelphia have recovered about half of their decline. Los Angeles opened last week. New York was the hardest hit, but recovered about half of its normal. I looked at the last report I had on Boston, which was about 2 weeks ago. They are up about 39% from where they were at the beginning. It's positive. It's trending even better than the industry from a national and a pre-virus point of view. So Boston is in the recovery mode as well. From a segment point of view, among the top 5 segments as shown there, large pickups have been the most resilient. So SUVs, so sport utilities and crossovers, are improving. Compact cars have been the hardest hit so far. Go to the next slide. From brand's point of view, Detroit 3 remains the most resilient. That's Chrysler, GM, and Ford. They have a 41 share of market, which is higher than they have been in the past. Non-premium brands, which are primarily Asian and Japanese, are now up to 47%. So they're now back to the leading brands across the US. The recovery there has been the introduction of 0% financing. You could say Hyundai and Nissan have 0.84 months. And the Japanese brands of Toyota, Honda, Subaru, Volkswagen, for the German side, all have either 0 to 60, up to 2.9 of 72 months. Premium brands, which are luxury brands, now have introduced new incentive from a zero financing point of view. And you can see all the brands listed there. They're either 0 or 1.9% financing between 60 and 72 months. What's really turned around this industry so far has been this 0 to 84-month financing, which has allowed customers to purchase more expensive vehicles for less money down and for a cheaper monthly payment. This incentive has kind of awoken the car customer to come back into the dealership. From a leasing point of view, and I know Massachusetts is a very strong leasing market, 20% of buyers are leasing right now, which is improving. The norm has been about 29%, but the prospects are looking very good. About 1.8 to 1.9 million leases are expiring in the US between the months of March and July, and they're expected to come back in the market after delaying their purchases anytime between the later part of this month and June and July. The used car market is now also in a recovery mode. May sales to date are only 21% below the normal. Auction sales, which is the pipeline to get product to the dealerships, is now back to normal. And the new used and certified pre-owned incentives, as well as a 90-day deferred payment program, has been added to used car programs for most dealers, which is also stimulating back the used car market. Next slide. The best news is that we are running into some shortages of cars, but as of this week, all major US car companies, except for two, Volkswagen and Nissan, are back in operation. General Motors, the Detroit brand, started this week, and the Japanese and Asian brands started at the earlier part of this month. They will begin shipping to dealers anytime between now and the middle part of June. They'll be getting new vehicles. It's going to start up slow because of the safety protocols at the plants. So we're not going to have full production beginning until probably mid to late June. But this new production will arrive at dealerships. That means enhanced marketing incentives for the early part of July, as well as new co-op. As dealerships wholesale new product, getting this new wholesale, the factories will begin to provide new wholesale and new co-op advertising and co-op marketing programs. So look for very strong marketing. Look for very strong incentives to kind of enter the marketplace anywhere from the Memorial Day weekend all the way through July 4th, which is a peak selling period for the car business. So this is going to be a really strong recovery period and pick up the momentum we've established over the last 6 weeks. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. I'm going to now pass it control over to Jen Dragon, a creative director of CMG Digital, and she'll be able to take it from here.
Thank you very much. I'm waiting for confirmation that I have control, as I have many times throughout this process. Look what I've done. That's not controlling anything. That's some different thing altogether. Can you pop that into presentation mode for me? Or maybe I can just do it. Here we go. See how this works. All right, well, let's give it a shot. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for giving us some of your time today. As promised from the beginning, I'm going to talk a little bit about messaging during COVID and beyond, as we're hopefully headed that direction. The fact of the matter is we are so ready for the grand reopening of everything. How nice would it be if we could get the dunk tanks ready and everything else that is appropriate for a grand reopening, barbecues, hot dogs for the kids, but we're just kind of not there yet, right? How nice would it be if there was an on and off switch? We could just be done with this and put it to off and everything go back to normal. But unfortunately, that's just not the way it's going to work, as you've probably noticed. This situation is evolving like every day. You know, we're getting someplace, we're not. Oh, here comes something in the fall, or it's not. You know, so the fact is, it's fluid. It's changing all the time. And you know, in between shelter in place, beginning back over to the return to normal, there's a whole lot of gray area in between. And your messaging should also follow that gray area. So what does it mean for your messaging? Well, you know what, with so many important messages right now for your customers, at this point, think of it less as an advertising message and think of it more as a communication strategy. You've got a lot of important stuff to say. You always did, don't get me wrong, but today really people are looking for you to understand or explain to them, you know, what you're doing as a business to, you know, stay up on what's happening in our world. So let's look at a series of ads. Now, I want to go and say these are fictitious ads, and some of them have way too much copy on me. The creative in me wanted to preface this whole thing in that way, but I really just want to talk about what types of messaging needs to happen and not as much about the design. But and P.S. I also want to add that you heard, before, all about these great incentives, like unbelievable, never before seen incentives. And I'm not suggesting you don't include that in your advertising. I'm specifically talking about branding ads, which you're hopefully running along with your incentive ads. But just to level set, we're talking about branding ads only. So pre-outbreak, this would have been a fine ad, right? Serving Orlando families since 1978. Kind of saying how long you've been around, that families are your priority, the call to action of visiting the showroom, and of course your great deal is just a handshake away. Now, how quickly did this world respond to certain images looking great and being perfectly sensible, and then the next thing you look at this, you go, where's the mom on any of this? Why are none of them wearing masks? Are they actually touching each other? I hope everybody's washed their hands, right? It's the simplest little thing that, again, would have been perfectly normal in an ad 6 months ago. But the world is not where we were 6 months ago. I bet you knew that. But as shelter in place began, and with especially with dealerships not allowed to be opening, the first move when shelter in place began is to talk about alternate ways of doing business. Okay, because you can't go in our showrooms for the health and safety of your family and ours, because P.S., customers not only want to know that you're going to keep them safe, they want to know that you're keeping your employees safe too. That's a major thing that we're seeing in successful ads. And then offering shop in the comfort of your own home. And then suddenly the ways that you all, no doubt, quickly pivoted your business to offer at-home test drives, sanitized vehicle home delivery, and moving people toward the non-dealership way of shopping with you, whether that be online or calling up or both. The call to action moved from visit our showroom to view our current inventory, offering immediate response to what's going on right now, what's going on now, and changing that that tagline, your great deal is just a virtual handshake away. So all of these just say, hey, we know what happened here. We're not running the first ad because that would be insane. We're pivoting and we're changing you how to telling you how to do business with us in this changing situation. Well, this is the one in particular, has way too much copy on it, but it says the right things. And in a normal situation, you would kind of animate it and use that device to get more copy on this ad. But for our purposes today, I'm just showing you everything all at once. As we talked about, service is a major part. So what I saw dealerships do all over the country is make sure they had a good, solid, strong service ad right now. That the ones that also talk about how you've pivoted your business, that you stay home, we'll pick up your car and we'll deliver your car back, and we're going to fully sanitize it when you get it back. And also this notion of people aren't driving their cars a lot now. I can only speak to my household, but I do know that I'm not alone. In the normal hustle and bustle of things, I got my car's making a funny sound. Well, how am I going to get to work if I give them my car because I can't get a loaner? Or, whatever the reason, needing to go to work every day was an awfully good excuse for not getting things done. So now that we can know that people aren't driving a lot right now, it's just a reminder, not only, again, we're staying at the cutting edge, we actually know you're not driving a lot right now. This ad was just made to talk about the situation that we're all in right now. And even down to the bottom, I want to highlight offering that option, because you know what else happened to people? I bet you do know. Economically, a lot of people are suffering. Right? So bringing it in for full service repairs would be fantastic, maybe not in the cards for people. In order to not exclude them and actually say, hey, I know what you're going through in your own way, want to do the work yourself, we'll deliver the parts. So you're offering that option to people, and again, staying cognizant of the fact that they may not have the money for full service right now, but in offering an option to work with them in spite of that. And then finally, as we start to return to normal, remember that light switch thing? Well, and every state is thinking about this a little differently. And I've seen some things going on in your state, not unlike what's going on in my state, which is Georgia, where there's some differing opinions about where we should be with this right now. So immediately going, hey, come back to the dealership. There's a dunk tank. There's hot dogs for the kids, you know, rather than go all the way like that, continue to offer that option of shopping at home. You don't want to alienate someone just because they may not be ready to shop at the dealership. And also, if people want to come out the dealership, you need to let them know that that's a possibility. Let me tell you though, we exceed and all preventative guidelines as recommended by the CDC. That belongs on your ads. If you're offering people to come to your dealership, no matter how long, you know, there will be a certain amount of time that the CDC recommends this. As long as they do, make sure this is on your ads. That puts anyone who may be on the fence, am I ready, am I not ready? That's that extra vote of confidence to say, if I walk in there, nobody's going to walk up to me without a mask and try to shake my hand. So giving those people that aren't sure where they belong at the home or the dealership may push them into the dealership if you remind them that you're following all these protocols. So, and you guys in this industry, you have been through it and I'm sure you've seen it. But I just wanted to share with you a couple of other ways that people are shifting their businesses right now and doing what they do, but just differently. You know, a big part of the sale is to be able to walk somebody through the features of a car. A lot of dealerships are turning to YouTube for this. You know, taking the time to make a video on each of the new cars in your inventory right now to show them all the things that you'd show them if they were in the dealership with you. Another huge one, and maybe you're seeing this up there too, but is including a gift certificate to a local business. Once again, that does a couple of things. One says, hey, we know you'd probably like to eat out at this point because of what's going on. People are tired of cooking. A second one, and the most important one is, hey, we are a local business supporting our other local businesses. And that's really that message is of community, which make people feel good about doing business with you, quite frankly. And then this was totally unique. I've only seen one person do this, but they're offering a free oil change and rotation to senior customers. You know, logistically, if that makes sense or not for your business, from a style perspective, it's the right thing to do, right? It's that customer service going above and beyond for people in need at this time. So if there's any bandwidth to do even a limited number of things like this, it's really appreciated by the community we're in. Now, there's also other things going on. You know, this came from Cox Automotive, the study in 2019. And so there's an opportunity now to pay attention to what wasn't working before and capitalize that now, specifically how long the process took, right? So if you looked at this, I'm satisfied with, hey, they like the test drive, so you can still do that. You can drop the car off at their house. There's many ways to keep that going, but all the way down the list is how long the process took. And you know this comes up. This is not the first research that you've seen to suggest that. We bought a car, my family bought a car for the first time in 10 years, and I thought, oh boy, I'm sure they've really cleaned this whole process up. They did not clean this process up. It took us 3 hours to get out of there, and we didn't finance anything. And I've never had any other experience. And no dealership likes to think that they're guilty of this, but everyone I've been in does. And 58% agreed that it took too long. So in this process where you're doing things over the internet or maybe with someone not sitting there, you really have an opportunity to work on those procedures and clean them up. By the way, satisfied with a new dealership experience. Everybody liked the paperwork and negotiation a whole lot more when they were doing it digitally. So there's something to be learned from that. Send people home in the future, you know, and let them do this part over the computer or whatever. But there's a great opportunity here to figure out what wasn't working and make it work now. And another option for that too is, you know, I'm sure you've seen this in different places. But guess what? All of those millennials who are thinking, you know what, I just don't feel like I need to get my license. There's Uber, there's Lyft, there's public transportation. Well, in the middle of a pandemic, turns out they're rethinking that. A lot of people are starting to move toward away from public transportation and rideshare services in this situation. And why is that? 3/4 of respondents gave an unsurprising reason: greater control of hygiene. So you may have a market opening up for you that wasn't there before. And even sending out messages around this, you know, would be very, very beneficial at this point. So I'll leave you with just a couple of things. One is, there's been a lot of canary in the coal mine moments, and I think you've probably seen it when it comes to advertising. A lot of people went ahead of you and did some things that worked, and they also did some things that didn't work. So I don't know if you guys have seen this video. It's very fascinating if you get a chance to look it up. But somebody made a conglomeration of a lot of COVID videos with the notion that they're all looking the same at this point, right? The empty streets, the newspaper rolling down the streets, the tinkling piano music reminding us in these uncertain times, and we're in this together, and all of the things. You've heard them. You're a citizen of this world too. You've heard them. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with any of these statements as standalone statements, but that's exactly where the problem lies, though, when you leave them standalone. To say you're here for me and not say because we are offering at-home test drives, because we're showing up for seniors with free services. We're here for you, followed by nothing else, is empty, and it's getting noticed in the consumer world, right? They're understanding that this is not saying anything. So if you want to say something like this, go for it. Just make sure you qualify. Why we're here for you. And the last thing, consistency. No matter what your messaging is, make sure it's matching what your social media says, what your radio ads say on air, down to your dealership, right? So if you want to talk all day in your digital ad about maintaining those CDC guidelines, but I go to your website and you don't say anything about that there, I'm going to start to wonder, is this something they really still do? And if another dealership makes it very clear to me that that is what they're doing, I may move over there for that very simple fact. Down to the storefront. So in front of the dealership, put those reminders out there. We are maintaining social distancing. Forgive us, you know, we're not doing the handshake thing right now. All of those things will inspire confidence, again, for those people who are not sure if they're going to be ready to go out into the real world anytime soon. And then lastly, I'll leave you, this is it from me, but 3 things you can do. So the guy with the handshake in the family. Are you running anything like that? I'm quite sure you're going to tell me no, and I believe you, but just double check. Go back and look at the things that you're running, because again, without even meaning to, it can appear very tone deaf. You know, if you're just pretending like this never happened, and people will again start to wonder where you fall on these kind of things. And also we looked at, you know, phase by phase, pre-COVID, shelter in place starts. Shelter in place continues, and then moving on to the future and making sure that your business knows exactly where they stand at each phase. And it really has a lot to do with where your customers are. And then lastly, you know, last piece of advice is if you know where your business fits at each phase, you can move backward and forward through them in a fluid way, because you know, we all want this to just continue to get better and better until we're normal. And I hope that's the case. But if it's not, if that, you know, fall outbreak happens again, you know, you'll know where to go to because you will already have figured that out. So hopefully you'll find this helpful. And with that, I'll move that over to Justin.
All right, let me get control here. So I'm going to talk about navigating the path forward. But it doesn't look like I'm controlling that. So I'll just start talking about it. Okay, there we go. Luke, can you get me back in presentation mode? Actually, I'm still not controlling it. But that first slide there, while we try to figure that out, is, okay, let me go back, is navigating the path forward. So we want to try to decode that path to recovery for you. We're going to show you kind of what we're thinking about and what we see from our perspective. And am I controlling that? There we go. All right, now I'm good. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is how to take action early. There we go. Sorry, I am not controlling this, Luke. I'm not moving it, and it is moving without me. So technical difficulties aside, I can start from there if that's okay, Luke, and you can control maybe. All right, so search demand is down across all categories and price points. That's probably not surprising to anybody here. What we see is, if you can go to the next slide, Luke, is this drop is in line with a reduced number of shoppers and vehicle registrations. So what we're seeing, it kind of makes sense across the board. Next slide there, Luke. And so what history has taught us about, sorry, I'm getting 2 slides at the same time here. What history has taught us is the decisions that you make right now are going to have a big impact just a few months from now. It's not going to take a long time for this impact to happen. Luke, next slide there. I think now I'm on track. Okay, now I'm good. The path forward being as uncertain as it is, industry experts have a bunch of different scenarios that they're considering. You'll look at scenario 1, business consolidation. I'm not going to read all these points, but a couple things to consider. Smaller OEMs might be possible M&A targets right now. Larger OEMs might consolidate their brand and product portfolio. Scenario 2, it's supply chain optimization. You're going to see, possible OEM acquisition of tier 2 and 3 suppliers. The retail digitization is something that Jen already sort of touched on. Virtual showrooms may become a standard offering and kind of required participation. Vehicle education. I just saw a great video of a virtual test drive of an actual salesperson at taking somebody and explaining everything that they were experiencing. I think you'll see a lot more of that. Scenario 4, something that maybe people aren't talking as much about, but sales and revenue loss might shrink R&D budgets. And that, you can think about the long-term implications that would have. I'll go to the next slide there, Luke. I will send this deck out or you'll have access to this deck to read all of those different scenarios. While the timing of COVID-19 is uncertain, there are things that we can do now. And that's what we're going to talk to you about, some of that. Next slide. This is a repeat, just reminding you what we're about to talk about. So step 1, take action early to recognize sudden shifts in consumer behavior and lay the foundation for a strong recovery. Let's talk about how to do that. So I won't read all of this, but 50% of U.S. respondents indicated a decline in their usage of public transportation, taxis, and ride sharing in the last 30 days. I think we're seeing that with all the news that's coming out about Uber. It's definitely not surprising. 34, this is a survey done by Google, 34% say that this is strictly because of COVID-19. You can see, I'll highlight China is interesting too. China, where a lot of folks don't have cars, you're seeing consumers who they've strengthened their intention to purchase one. 72%, that's a lot of people. So we'll be seeing some of that here as well. If you can go next slide, Luke. So these are the 6 major changes impacting OEMs and dealers in the auto sector that we've observed. So most auto intenders, this is a massive survey. Most auto intenders have not altered their plans as of March, or they may even intend to buy sooner. Users are showing a preference for digitizing all steps of their purchase journey. Users are seeking out deals and broader financing options. I'm going to get into all of these in more detail. As concerns around public transportation increase, people are turning to personal cars for comfort. People are interested in taking vehicle repairs into their own hands. I just read a stat, how to change your oil. There's about 1 million videos on that. Their viewership is up 900%. It's increased 9 times since the pandemic started. Users are seeking information on dealership openings during the uncertainty of lockdowns. You can go to the next slide, Luke. So let's talk about the first one. You can see where the U.S. falls here. But really this is hopefully dispelling a myth. But 27 out of 100 auto intenders began considering a vehicle purchase or decided to purchase sooner as of March, after the pandemic had started. So that's pretty significant. If you can go to the next one, Luke. So this is, I wanted to stop down on this a little bit. You're seeing, I think that I've spoken to many auto dealers over the years who had strong opinions about online only car sales. You're seeing this has caused a major shift. I think Carvana's stock is in the high 90s now. I mean, I think that's evident that people are starting to prefer this. And so what are you doing to get the majority of your car buying experience online? Next one there. This is users are seeking out deals and broader financing options. So I used Google Trends to get this stat, but there are more and more searches, and you can see the really sharp incline in this of people using searching for specific deals for better financing options. There's a lot more search activity around that. Where search overall has decreased, a lot of that has been people searching for, obviously there's massive search decline in things like dealership near me and search terms that have been popular forever, and those have been replaced by people kind of bargain shopping. Next slide, Luke. So this is also not surprising, but I think the good news here is pre-outbreak, 34% selected private car on the mode of transportation they preferred. That's now 66%. What you see is massive declines in bus, taxi, and ride-hailing services. Next one there. People are interested in taking vehicle repairs. This is what I mentioned, is you see a really large spike for oil change, looking at things on like how to repair. You can see a couple examples there, how to flare brake lines, how to change a tire, and see the massive search increases that those have had all the way through mid-April there. And that data gets released about every month, so that's why it's lagging just a little bit. A couple interesting things here. Really, Google My Business pages the viewership is way up of those as well. That's where businesses are displaying their hours of operation. It's also where you're starting to see messages of, like Jen had mentioned earlier, about measures that are being taken. Hey, if you come in, this is things to know. We're going to be standing 6 feet away from you. So keeping your Google My Business page up to date is incredibly important. Next. All right, so immediate actions. Ensure customers are able to access clear and up-to-date information. There are tools out there that will allow you to make business hour changes or things like that. And once you make it in that tool, it will go through all of the different places that information is held. In your specific industry, in the automotive industry, there's about 100 aggregate sites that ask you what your hours of operation are. And there are tools out there that will update that across all of those. And that will be incredibly important, because if you miss even one of them, you might miss out on somebody. We've already talked about updating any messaging. Consider options to give back during the crisis and adopt your content and messaging towards that purpose. There is a trend right now that is now so popular that Google Trend is tracking it. That is auto dealers that are giving back to charity. So if people are interested in that, and that's something you're already doing, or if it's not doing, maybe considering doing it. But if it's something you're already doing, is that prominently featured on your website, in all your ad messaging, and everywhere that somebody might see it. Next slide there. Okay, so I'm not going to go into this, but this is kind of a how-to on how to update that Google My Business page and adjust for, once you've decided or are able to open back up completely. It's also, if you have parts of the business, I understand that in Boston, people are allowed to take their car in for service. Those are things that you are able to notate within your Google My Business page, and this will tell you what to do and how to do it. But we will give you that information and talk to the folks at Marketing 25 at Boston 25 to help you there. Next one. So these are some suggestions and examples that will be clickable examples when you get this presentation. Some of the messages that people are giving as to how different dealerships are talking about the support and that they're offering. So you can see offer loaner vehicles to medical staff and the first responders who may be without a car. That is a powerful one in terms of click-through rate. I'm the nerd who's looking at search click-through rates and things like that. When messages like that are included, the click-through rate is way higher than we've seen even pre-pandemic. Offering complimentary or discounted services to medical staff, free vehicle cleanings to medical staff is a very powerful one that we're seeing really high click-through rates on. That I'm in Dallas. That is really prominently featured in Dallas. I started doing some research in anticipation of this. It's not as prominently featured in Boston, so there's an opportunity there. Next slide there, Luke. Thank you. All right, so monitor signs of recovery and capture demand. Talk a little bit about that. Ready for reopening, adopt new customer service models and open up lines of communication. I'm going to go into each of these, remember. Feature the virtual showroom and test drives for those still researching. Test that virtual showroom. A/B test that thing, come out with 2 versions of it. There's software like Optimizely and Google Optimize 360 that'll allow you to test out multiple versions. It is so important for your conversion rate. It's really important that you launch the one that's going to perform best for you. Launch and reveal vehicles virtually alongside streamed motor shows. Offer reassurance to auto shoppers through offers and promotions. Promote in-store inventory with local campaigns. That's a product called local campaigns. So we'll talk about that. And then adopt your tactic campaigns to changing decision-making factors like hygiene. Get into those now. So adopt new customer service models. Jen talked about some of this, but what paperwork can customers complete at home? Do you have a process to appraise trade-ins remotely? I am actually going through that myself right now, and selected somebody who does. That's actually the reason I included this bullet point in here, is I really appreciated that they were able to appraise my trade-in remotely when quite a few other dealerships couldn't. That's incredibly important to me and my family right now. Chats and virtual consultations. Also say that Google Hangouts, if you're some of us are trying to keep expenses low right now. Google Hangouts is a free way to connect with customers using video. So with a million video solutions out there and a lot of them costing money, that's one that I would definitely consider. Next one there, Luke. Feature the virtual showroom and test drives for those people that are still researching. Vehicle walkarounds, test drives with real sales associates. There was a study done by YouTube that showed, or Google, who owns YouTube, that showed that when someone was considering virtually buying a car, and they were dealing with the sales associate who was featured in the video doing the test drive itself, they were 65%. They bought 65% more of the time, more often. You don't need expensive production. You don't need to spend a ton of money. These can be fast turn things. And then having if you've got something like an all new model, consider going a step further and doing some kind of live stream event on YouTube or other mediums. Offer reassurance. We talked a little bit about this. Jen, I won't spend too much time on it, but it's important to offer reassurance to folks at this time, and make sure that those promotions are everywhere that somebody might be looking. Right now, when search demand is down, push marketing is that much more important. This also leads us into local campaigns. You do not want to start these until the dealership is open. But it is nice because the advertiser, have complete flexibility to select which appears in that format. We could do to be candid, we could probably do a whole seminar just on this. But it's something that's worth either researching on your own or talking to a Boston 25 rep about. Next one, Luke. So accelerate the digital transformation to build long-term business resilience. I'll talk a little bit about how to do that. All right, so use change in user demand now to rebuild your digital sales approach. Simplify and digitize all steps of the purchase process. We already talked some about that. Work with OEMs to redevelop your e-commerce process. There's a lot that is available to you that you need to be asking for. bring all functions, not just sales, into the e-commerce offering, and explore advanced digital communication tools to lessen the load on manual interactions. Next step, or next slide there, Luke. So assess key elements of the online process. Right now you can use analytics and reporting to help inform this. But the car buying process is still complex, as Jen pointed out. And if you don't agree, at least that's the perception of your customers. As you think about how to bring that online, it's important that you're considering every piece of this process, and really imagining someone going from a starting point to the finish line. And create integrated projects across your business units to ensure that the existing car platforms become more than an inventory play. Again, please reach out to our counterpart for e-commerce recommendations. And we can not only help with the sales side, but we'll be happy to talk to you about how we can support you in bringing other elements of the car buying process online. Next step there. Work with your OEMs to redevelop your e-commerce process. What are they doing? What's in their cycle? What are there ways to get involved or advocate? Be a test, a test pilot for some of these things. There's a link there that you can check out on your own. FCA launches Drive FCA. So many of you are probably familiar with that already. But what I would tell you is, even with something that has been signed off on in that regard, test multiple versions of anything that you're considering. Build out A/B tests, and because it can cost you so much money to make the wrong decision there. Next slide, Luke. Oh, that was it. Cool. I finished right on time. All right. I think we left some time for some Q&A. Maybe, Luke?
We absolutely did. Sorry about that. So just making sure that we have everyone unmuted here. And my apologies to the attendees for the technical issue there related to the control of the presentation, but hopefully that went pretty smoothly on your end. And just wanted to jump right into some of the questions we've been receiving for the group here. And actually the first one will be for, I would say Steve would probably be best at answering this question. What are you seeing as some of the most trusted sites that a potential auto buyer visits in this new environment?
Well, they all first and foremost trust the OEM sites, because that's where the factory presents the product. They present the ongoing programs that are available right now to purchase. They also will showcase the safety protocols that are available for dealers in that market area. And also pricing and other marketing activities. So it's kind of the central location for where everything is going on relative to the marketplace and the products they're interested in. And then there's a various number of digital auto intender sites. They kind of go in and out of favor depending on who's marketing themselves at this particular point in time. Consumer Reports is also viewed as a very strong site because of their reputation for product reviews and product programs, and then JD Powers, and there are others. But the OEM sites are right now, considering what's going on, are the sites that most people go to kind of look what's going on and what products are available.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Now, with the new online consumer journey, are we seeing a difference in related to what that looked like pre-pandemic and then in the new environment? With that digital journey, that might be more of a Justin question. If you're seeing a difference related to search habits and folks in their buying position,
yes. There's a lot of ways to answer that question, but one thing I can tell you is the consideration phase is shortened. Google had reported that from time of first search to conversion for the campaigns that they were tracking, the average pre-pandemic was 91 days. And now that is shortened to 43 days. You can find that on a study that Google published called, I believe it's called, it's something with automotive and COVID-19 in the title. I'll try to think of what that is, but that's, half. Who knows if that's something that will stick around after the fact, but that means that people are It's also, Google's theory is that it's also that people have more time to do research that they might have had to spread out over a longer period of time previously, but now that many folks are working from home, they're able to get more of that research done faster. So it may not just be the pandemic that's driving that behavior, but those are a couple ways. There has not been a shortening of the amount of touch points that people have during the car buying process. Google estimates that to be 26 different touch points that somebody would have digitally before they would actually purchase. So they're still doing the same amount of research. They're just doing it in a shorter period of time.
Thank you. And Jen, what are some things that we should be avoiding related to being that we're in phase 1 right now of this reentry process in regard to messaging? What should be avoided?
Yeah, I mean, not leading with safety, right? I mean, I've just seen that backfire on people so badly. And I'm sure, again, you guys have too, especially on social media where people can write back. It's amazing, one misstep out there and then suddenly people pile on. I recently saw a hibachi restaurant kind of coming back to the table, and I realized automotive and restaurants are two different things, but they decided not to talk about social distancing or anything they were going to do. It was more, hey, pick up, our hibachi tables are open, come get your hibachi. And it blew up with like 180, I'll take my hibachi with a side of COVID-19. I mean, every business owner's complete nightmare. And it just doesn't, but on the other side, hey, we're taking all the precautions, goes over well. Hey, thanks for thinking of us. You're going to be on our list for takeout, or we're going to come see you. Not doing it really can produce bad results. So just that would be above all things. Make sure you put safety in there, and then don't think it's time not to, because it's not time not to.
Thank you, Jen. Are we seeing more of a demand for used or new in this environment?
Well, the new and used ratio, before this world changed, the new and used ratio was about 1-to-1. It started out pretty heavy new. Used was basically weak because of the lack of auction, the lack of supply. Dealers were not buying used cars were not taking cars in trade, and also the auction market was dead. Now the auction market is back, and used car and there are deals on used cars. Like I said before, 0 financing, 90 days delayed payments. So the used car market is back and actually doing a little bit better right now from a ratio to last year than new.
Thank you, Steve. And then just as a reminder, folks that are attending here, just feel free to click on the chat in the bottom there or on the Q&A to ask any questions that are on your mind, please. That'd be great. Have we seen the decision/buying cycle lengthened or shortened during the pandemic, or do we have any information on that?
I think that was the similar question earlier, which is that it has shortened. And if you saw that survey that we talked about at the front end of my section, many people responded that they were going to shorten the amount of time. They were going to speed up their decision-making process.
And to add to Justin's point, it depends on what the current status of the ownership of the vehicle is. If it's a lease car or truck,
good point.
And it's coming off of lease, and they have to contact their finance. They have to contact the finance company or the captive finance company to see what latitudes they have to extend their lease payment, extend their lease term if they want to stay out of the market. Or if it's a purchase, then certainly they own the car. They can kind of dictate when they want to come back in the market to purchase.
And here's another group question that I think is really important and timely is what can we learn from the markets that have entered into more of a later phase process than our area has, both negatively and positively? Like, what have we learned as missteps? What have we learned as best practices? What can we bring to our market to do this as effectively as possible?
I told you about the hibachi thing, right? I did mention the hibachi thing. That's where I'll stop. Yeah, Steve, what do you think?
Jennifer's point is you have to appreciate the concern of the consumer and respect their uneasiness of going back to the market. I've listened to dealers over the last couple of weeks, and they're walking before they run to market themselves, and they're being very respectful of the market they're in and the consumers they're going after.
And Jen, I have one for you. In dealership signage, is there any recommendation related to that? As far as you mentioned the synergistic messaging you have across, social and your website and any type of on-air medium. What about in
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really is that last vote of confidence a consumer is going to get before they decide to come in and interact with you. So, you want to make sure that's good and positive. And again, I know that people are all over the board on this, but you're going to have a lot more trouble from what I've seen to not leave that out or to leave that out. Yeah, it may appeal to a certain group of people. I mean, that's just the world we're in, but you will definitely turn off the people that the concerns linger for. And it doesn't seem to be working the other way around. When I mentioned that post that I saw, when somebody does it right, you don't get people going, "Oh, how dare you protect us and your employees." It doesn't happen that way.
I have a question for Jennifer. The CSR piece of the puzzle, dedicating themselves. Dealers are very proactive with the communities,
Mm-hmm.
charities. How different or how similar should they be today in marketing or working with the community in terms of helping the community go through this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great place to be. I mean, a lot of times dealerships are kind of like that staple business in our community, and to see them advocating for other local restaurants, seniors, or any other charities they get involved in is a great thing to see. I mean, but I will say, a ad that says that's very self-serving. It's not going to do you any favors either, right? Look at us, we've just helped all these poor children. Like, oh, okay, but it gets exploitative, at a certain point. But being able to help nobody's going to get mad about about anything you're doing to help, but it's all about tone and how you do it. I mean, and that's why I really just love the the local restaurants thing, because these are neighbors, these are fellow business owners in the community, and we all know that they can't have their doors open right now. So here's one business extending their hand out to another, and I think it's a beautiful message, and done correctly, it's completely appropriate and should be done.
And we've talked a lot about the tier 3 side of the business. But looking at our attendance, we also have quite a few folks that are on the tier 2 side, and handling the whole dealer group, both their marketing and their messaging strategy. Is there any advice that you would give them that would be any different, that would help with their process and planning?
Well, they have to follow I think tier 2 has to, one is, as I said earlier, they have to kind of, their budgets come from the wholesale of product into the marketplace. So now that the factories are back up and building vehicles again and shipping vehicles, their budgets are going to kind of get restored. Number one. Number two, they take a lot of creative and marketing direction from the car companies themselves. What's the incentives that are going on? What's the messaging? Ford does the Detroit companies have done a really strong job in messaging. Toyota and Lexus have done a pretty strong job in messaging right now. Reflecting that messaging in the regional approach would also, I think, be very effective. Jennifer, would you agree with that?
I would, and taking that message and localizing it and really putting that answer to those questions of, because I'll be honest with you, some of those national car brands are among the biggest culprits when it comes to everybody sounding alike. I mean, so, if Lexus is going to go out there and say, we're here for you, you at the local level, tell me how. We're here for you by, we're going to offer that free tile rotation or no payments for 10 months or whatever it is. Just I think they've thrown out a big ball that you can catch and make it work.
And are we seeing what are the most trusted or used media channels for the auto buyer in this world? Are we seeing any information about that?
Well, the one that has become a lot more important during this has been YouTube. YouTube's viewership, crazy stat is that there are 1 billion hours right now, 1 billion hours of YouTube watched every day, which is 114,000 years of YouTube watched every day right now. So I guess, I'm sure it's not surprising to hear that their viewership is way up, but it's become a more important advertising medium. And what we've seen is people who traditionally put that money with Google or a variety of other places, there's been more money moving over to where the viewership is, which is where YouTube is.
Any surprises with consumer behavior that you've seen recently that we might be able to help help our group with in terms of how that those shifts? I know we've talked a lot about it in our presentation here, but anything that we haven't covered that's kind of on your mind?
Luke, the recovery is pretty shocking to the car companies and to the business community. I think the dealers were expecting a much more slow reaction, slow response. There was a lot of work. There was a lot of pitch to the North American dealer, the NADA, to kind of do another Cars for Clunkers program because they just felt it was going to be in this malaise of business buying environment. But the recovery, the fact that you can put an extraordinary deal out there of 0% financing for 84 months, or 90 or 6 months, what Hyundai did, which is basically protect someone if they lose their job, which they did about 3 years ago. Those kind of techniques and marketing activities reflective of times did stimulate people to come back in the market and give them a very positive attitude about it is the time to buy a car, and the deals right now might not be replicated in 6 months.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think services like conversion rate optimization have never been more important. Testing out not only messaging on the website, but experiences on the website and making sure that it is something that does drive sales really has never been, it's never been two things. It's never been more important. It's also never been as easy to measure. There's more end-to-end activity happening online now, which makes it a lot easier for companies like us to measure the effectiveness of something. In the past, where we might lose visibility once somebody sort of stops that behavior online and takes that behavior into the dealership, now we're seeing more of that end-to-end experience happen online, which just makes it a lot easier for us to say, if you go with this version versus this version, this is the impact that it has. It's a lot easier to draw that straight line to the impact.
And the other thing, I think Justin will agree with me also, is that dealers are this is a wake-up call to dealers to how to digitize their selling process and shorten this 4 to 5 hour selling activity at a dealership. This is the way that customers are maybe going to want to do this in the future from a long-term point of view, engage online, shorten the amount of process to purchasing vehicles, and having the digital process expedite that and make it much more friendly to the customer. So that's a big wake-up call for dealers right now as well.
Are there any incentives or programs that are in the near future that we're seeing in other markets that might come to our market, or is there anything that that we should be aware of that you might have from your experience, Steve?
I think that what we're doing in the U.S. is even is I haven't heard anything in Europe or Asia that has been anywhere near the scope of and response that the U.S. car companies have done. So I think we've led that process. The customers come back in China, but not at the level of the U.S. And the recovery in the terms of you look at some of the charts from the auto industry, the European and Chinese recovery is nowhere near what we've seen in the U.S. so far in the last 6 weeks.
So I think the last one would be probably a group question, which would be, from your experience, what would be top 3 takeaways, action advice that you would give to the group, thinking that the group is automotive focused, tier 2, tier 3 predominantly. What can you give them as far as key takeaways to kind of leave and make actionable?
Well, I can lead. I think the best is yet to come. I think the recovery is underway. The momentum is picking up. For Massachusetts, you're in the early phase that if they can look at this, they can talk to 20 group members that they might have in the South or in the Midwest that didn't suffer what Massachusetts and the Northeast went through, and kind of learn from the recovery of what those dealers are going through. Best practices of the Midwest or Southern dealers would be very helpful for them to adapt as they get into phase 2 and phase 3.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I found the study I was looking for, and they surveyed 20,000 auto intenders, and another crazy stat is 56 said that they would choose one dealership over the other if the paperwork process was digital. I know that all of us talked about that part of it, but biggest takeaway, do that now as fast as you can possibly figure out how to get that experience online. And then, we talked about doing virtual showrooms, virtual test drives, all of that. If that's not already happening, and using your actual sales associates that might then be on that virtual call with folks, I would be all over that as well.
Yeah. And I left with a 3-thing slide, and I'm going to stand behind those 3 things. But I mean, but just to echo what was said here, I mean, I think we have all kind of had that moment with this lockdown where we go, you know, not everything about this is bad, right? Fundamentally, it's gosh darn awful, right? I mean, people, but in terms of the things that we're able to see, and that those things are like we talked about, like you have this opportunity to really shore up your digital space in at this time, and it needs to happen, right? I mean, everything has moved to digital. There should be no reason anymore for someone to sit for hours and hours in your dealership and wait for a deal to get done. And also, you know, figure out what's working. If people like at-home test drives, is that something you should continue forever and ever? Amen. I mean, I think I'd love to have that. If I could say, hey, could you bring me out this car, you know, with a little qualification or whatever. What a wonderful way to shop. So there are going to be things that you find during this process quite by accident, but that people are going to like and prefer, and pay attention to those and don't let them slip away, because it's really at the end of the day about evolving. And some of those things you learn can go on to the, you know, long term, not just for the short term.
Certainly reach out. The dealers and the dealer associations should focus on the customers they have. The dealers, the biggest asset they have is the customer base that they have. Taking care of their customers, reaching out to their customers at this time is the most important thing they could do to protect their business for today and for the future.
And Luke, I would just add, you know, viewership for linear TV and local OTT is an all-time high. Local news is the trusted resource and across the country, and definitely in Massachusetts and Boston. And I think we looked at a lot of different creative, but that video strategy has to coincide with what that message is online, and really telling that story of how you're going to keep people safe if they come in and purchase a car from you. That's the communication tool that you can get out to everybody, and then drill down with that message through a digital tactic.
Great. Well, we're coming right up at 5 o'clock. Thank you all very much to our panelists and to our attendees. I think that went very well. And what we'll have is we'll have this on demand. So we'll be able to send that to the folks that have attended, and we'll be able to provide the deck as well, and follow up with any additional questions that you may have. So thank you all very much. I hope you have a great day, and I'm going to sign off. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.